So what I want to do with this video is keep it pretty short and just give you a broad overview of what we'll be doing in Math 112. Because Math 112 is kind of a different class. There's two very unrelated topics that we'll be covering, and it might be kind of confusing why we're switching from one to the other and how this all combines to prepare you for calculus, as the title of this class might imply. This is your second pre-calculus class. So I just want to talk about how the different parts fit together, what you should know going in and what you should know going out. At our school anyways, we have two different classes that kind of fit under this bucket of pre-calculus. Math 111, which you may have just taken, and Math 112, which you're taking now. But really the way I think about it is this is just a continuation of what you were doing in Math 111. Our goal for both of these classes together is kind of the same, and that's to get you really, really good at functions. You want to be really, really good at functions because functions are an integral part of calculus. There's a bad math pun in there, but you don't have to worry about all that. Calculus, which at our school starts at 251 and then can continue depending on your major and how far you want to go with this stuff. There's lots of different calculus classes. I don't even want to worry about that. What I want to worry about is what you need to know going out of this class, going into calculus, because presumably that's why you're here. Most students who take the second in this pre-calculus sequence, this Math 112 class, are doing so to prepare themselves for calculus, regardless of how far you go along this path. So, okay, you say these two classes work together to prepare me for calculus, and what I'm supposed to be when I leave this class is an expert with functions. I kind of feel like I got that in Math 111, maybe is what you're thinking. Well, that's good if you did, because really in 111 what we do is we talk generally about functions. And when I say general function stuff, I mean, for example, understanding function notation, understanding how these two different questions here are very different. In the first one, they're giving you the input of 3 and asking you for the output. And in the second one, they're giving you the output as 3 and asking you what the input must be. The idea of domain and range, the possible inputs and outputs for a function. Different things you can do with functions, for example, composing them together or transforming them. And understanding their connection with their graph. How every function has a graph, and being able to use the graph of a function to answer some of these questions, and being able to use the equation of the function to answer questions. That's what I mean when I say kind of general function stuff. And the reason I'm listing it off is maybe to remind you of some stuff, but maybe also to just let you know what technically should be prerequisite knowledge as you come into this class. So if you're a little bit behind in any of this stuff, it might be good to know what you're behind in. And then after you get all this kind of general function stuff, that's great, but you're not quite ready for calculus. What we really want to do is, beyond just having this general knowledge of functions, we want to take 3 different families of functions and become experts at those 3 different families. The first of the 3 families of functions that you want to be an expert on before you take calculus are polynomial functions. So things like 3x squared plus 7x plus 1. This is a second degree polynomial, a quadratic polynomial. Hopefully you saw a lot of these in Math 111. You got really good at them. You learned about their X and Y intercepts, their end behavior, all sorts of different information about polynomials. And then that's kind of where Math 111 ends. And when Math 111 ends, Math 112 picks up. And what Math 112 does is it just finishes this picture, right? We still need to know all this general function stuff. And we can review a lot of this, but we won't really be learning too much new general function stuff. We'll just be talking about the remaining 2 families of functions that you want to be an expert in. And those 2 families are what are called exponential and logarithmic functions. And I know that sounds like 2 right there, but that's really just 1. These guys are related in some sense. And then the other family is trigonometric functions. So these are functions like sine and cosine and tangent. Maybe you've seen some of these, maybe you've seen all of these in the past, but you probably haven't gotten nearly in depth in either of these 2 families as we're going to get in this class. So really the idea is, before you get into calculus, you want to be really good with functions. What does it mean to be really good with functions? Well, you need to know these general things that are true about all functions, but then we also want to choose 3 of the most common types of functions, namely polynomial, exponential and logarithmic, and trigonometric, and then we want to study those in depth. So not just know the general stuff about them, but kind of be experts with these 3 types, because these will be 3 of the types that show up most commonly when you get into your calculus class. So you're like, okay, so that's what this class is, just studying these 2 types? Well, almost. There's one additional thing that maybe falls into this category of general function stuff, which you may or may not have seen in your Math 111 class. What happens here at SOU is it's not required to be taught in Math 111 because you don't need it until you get to Math 112. It definitely fits better in this general function stuff category, so maybe it would have fit better in Math 111. But in case anybody didn't see it in 111, I'm going to start the class with this topic. It's what are called inverse functions. So we're going to learn inverse functions in a general setting. It won't have anything to do with exponential and logarithmic functions or trig functions because we won't have learned either of those yet. We'll become experts with inverse functions because we'll want that knowledge for these 2 families. You don't really need that knowledge for the polynomial family, but you will need them for the 2 new things we'll talk about in this class. So our class will start here with inverse functions, and then we'll jump and we'll just study this type, and this will take us almost to the midterm. We'll spend almost half the class just studying this family of functions. And then we'll be like, all right, you're an expert with that function, let's move on. And we'll jump to this family. And if you haven't seen these before, you might be like, oh, okay, are these kind of like these, but like a more advanced version of these? No, not at all. This has absolutely no relationship to this. They're a completely different family. Just like these aren't related to polynomials and these aren't related to polynomials, these two aren't related at all either. Their only connection is that they're both taught in our class. So it'll be kind of a strange class in that it'll feel like it has two very distinct halves. We'll spend a lot of time dealing with exponential and logarithmic functions before the midterm, and it'll get pretty hard. We'll get pretty in depth with these guys, and if you get a little bit overwhelmed, well, the good news is shortly, we'll probably start just before the midterm, we'll move into a completely different family of functions that has absolutely nothing to do with this family of functions. So you'll kind of get a fresh start halfway through the class. And if you can walk into a calculus class with this knowledge of this general function stuff, and then you're pretty good with these three families of functions, you'll be in really good shape. However, I can tell you from teaching a lot of calculus in my life that there's one additional thing that you'll need that's not written on this paper that will go a long way to determine your success in calculus. It's kind of this overarching goal that shows up in all of the classes, all of the math classes that you learn prior to calculus, and it's algebra. I can tell you, if I had to pick a single factor that most determines a student's success in calculus, it's nothing that's explicitly taught in 111 or 112. It's this idea of a student's algebra skills. Most students who struggle with calculus do not struggle with calculus because of calculus. They struggle with calculus because they don't have the prerequisite algebra skills. And if you're trying to learn algebra while you're learning calculus, it makes it almost impossible. But if you're pretty good with algebra going into calculus, the new stuff that you'll learn won't be that bad. This will be a manageable class. In fact, this is one of my favorite classes. 251 and 252, dare I say, they're kind of fun. They're very interesting math classes. I'd argue that they're more fun or interesting than anything we're going to learn in this class or anything you learned in Math 111. But they're only fun and interesting if you're prepared for them. If you don't have the prerequisite knowledge, they're a nightmare. It's miserable. So my goal in this class is to get you to the point where when you walk into calculus, you're excited about it, you're interested in it, you get to enjoy those classes instead of being miserable. And in order to get you there, what I got to do is pick up any pieces that might have been missed in Math 111, teach you this new stuff from Math 112, and then throughout the entire section, help with algebra whenever I can. So those will be the goals of this class, and that's what we're going to be doing for the next 10 weeks.